Hello and welcome to the very first episode of Season 3 of Sequelisers. This is a show all about fixing bad sequels to good movies. If there was a good movie followed by a terrible sequel, you better believe we're going to try and fix it. Things are a little different around here for Season 3. Instead of releasing one episode every 2 weeks, we're going to be releasing an episode every week. It's all the same content, but we're splitting the usual format in half and discussing the terrible sequel in the first part, and then reading our team's pitches and discussing them in more detail in the second half. Don't worry, it's the same podcast, the same sequel fixing as ever, just a slightly different format. I'm your host, Jack Chambers, and joining me are the two teams of titular Sequelisers. The first team we have, Mr. Alec Plowman.
Yo.
And Mr. Stuart Ashen.
Hello.
And their opponents, Mr. Tim Maytom.
Ahoy there.
And Matt Stogdon.
Fuck you, asshole.
Oh god, straight off the
I had a
bat,
drop
you just
down
got
menu
in
of
there.
different
So
options.
if you had 15 seconds for how quickly until an Arnie impression, you just won the sweepstakes, listeners. If you hadn't already guessed, this episode is about fixing a franchise that began incredibly strongly and then fell off a goddamn cliff after this third movie. We're going to be talking about 2003's Terminator 3: Rise of the Machines.
Yay.
Yay!
I don't mind it.
You're wrong, Matthew Stogdon.
I'm gonna second this dickhead over here.
Hey, hello.
I discovered I don't hate it anywhere near as much as most people.
I discovered I
actually.
hate it more than I remember. This is going to be a good episode.
We've been dangerously mild so far.
Some
so
would say
we've got
this is
something
my Independence Day. Because I don't like T2. No, I don't dare say that in a room
Yeah,
with
I will fucking cut you.
I would say that T2,
Oh, not this again.
let's just sit down and have a rational conversation as human beings and strap Alec into the chair because he's going to have a problem. I say at T2, as much as I really enjoy it as a standalone piece, I can see him twitching in the corner of my eye.
You're just about to say, just think very carefully about how wrong you're about to be with what you're saying.
I genuinely believe it's the sequel that probably shouldn't exist because it pisses all over its own lore and franchise and ideas and makes so many fucking problems.
As does every other sequel in this franchise.
Oh god, yeah. Whereas Genesis,
On the basis of what Matt said, we've already won by default, right?
much,
That's
yeah.
okay, cool. Yeah, just to check.
Cool bullshit.
So to give this film some context, it is, as you probably already know, a follow-up to like two of the most iconic and influential sci-fi movies ever made. An 80s classic, a 90s classic, and then in the early 2000s, oh god, it's all gone horribly wrong. Weird special effects, weird shit like that. It's not the worst of the Terminator films because it's followed by Salvation and Genesis.
Yeah, Jesus Christ.
Because fucking hell, those movies. I still haven't seen Genesis, but I have now seen Salvation, and that is a piece of shit.
Yeah,
as well.
I watched Terminator 3 and thought, it's not good. But there are some really strong ideas here, and it's not awful in its execution. It is an acceptable film. It just, again, much like a lot of these other sequels, it follows two of the greatest films of all time, arguably. But Terminator Salvation is such a piss in the face in terms of everything. There is almost nothing redeemable in that film at all.
Yeah.
And then Genesis came out, and I thought, well, it's reboot territory. We're now in this stage where we're doing so many revisits of classic properties, and it was just so fucking horrifically monstrous. It was terrifyingly bad. I thought nothing could be worse than Salvation.
Genesis is such a weird hodgepodge of a film. It's like they're trying to make three different films at the same time, and you can see at the very base, like, oh, okay, maybe there's the fraction of a good idea in here, and then it just gets steamrolled over, and it just comes out the end. It's a camel. It's a horse made by committee.
Completely.
I've never seen Salvation or Genesis.
You're a lucky man.
I
Stuart.
never plan to. I'm sure I will one day by accident, but fall down
We
a
get
hole.
to
and it just
season
happens to be playing.
25 and we have to.
Oh no!
We're sequelizing the bad sequels to bad movies. So the Jaws 4 time, everybody, and we all want to kill ourselves.
I can remember a couple of years ago, I've never seen Salvation, but I had a weirdly detailed dream about what I thought it was about, and then
I want to watch that.
and then described it to Matt, and he was like, "Yeah, that's better than the actual."
I assume that dream is your pitch
pitch.
today.
I don't think it is actually.
No.
But it was good. But when we win, we've never won a first episode, but when we win this episode, we'll do that one. It's
Yeah.
obviously a natural.
Yeah. When?
So I'll give a quick synopsis for everybody. Strap yourselves in, ladies and gentlemen. It's going to get confusing with lots of acronyms and random numbers and stuff because that's a film full of robots.
You should probably prepare yourself because I imagine both yours and our picture is going to be the exact same thing.
The
Convoluted stuff and numbers.
SQ6000 and the TX1 as well. Oh,
Yep.
God.
Stereo
Anyway.
instructions.
Set more than 10 years after Terminator 2, John Connor now exists only as a drifter, living off the grid, so no more Terminators for the future can hunt him down. Unfortunately, Skynet does send another one back, and this one is called the TX, even more powerful and advanced than the dreaded T1000. However, another Arnie Terminator is also sent back to protect John against the TX. Now Skynet is patiently assuming control of civilian computer systems under the guise of a computer virus, and John has also met his future wife, Kate Brewster, whose father, a US Air Force general, is in charge of the military computer systems and is leery of uplinking Skynet. However, when the Skynet virus infects the US military computers and leaves the country open to attack, the machines begin their horrific takeover. Soon, a nuclear war will result and the war against the machines will begin. Can the outdated 101 Terminator eliminate the highly advanced TX, or will a dark future await mankind following the nuclear war?
See, based on the description, that doesn't sound awful.
Sounds all right.
Except for the fact that TX is not an advanced model, it's 10 models back.
Yeah,
It just has boobs
pretty much. Pretty
that
much.
inflate.
Stands for Terminatrix.
Yeah. Oh God.
Yep.
I didn't make that up.
That is a real
yeah.
thing, ladies and gentlemen, and we're sorry on behalf of
The world.
the world. Yeah.
And they try and make it. They try and justify like, oh, actually, it's more advanced because it's got the liquid metal skin, but underneath it's also got weapons. And then they barely use those weapons. And there's a moment where they're
we're
like,
definitely going to get into that.
it has all these options like flamethrower and blah and blah and blah, and then you like it uses 2 throughout the course of the film.
Both of them are just spitballs.
It's a giant straw.
Yeah.
Oh God, it's so advanced.
So before we tuck into why Terminator 3 needs sequelizing, of course, I need you guys to guess the Rotten Tomatoes
Oh, fuck.
percentage scores for
It's
Terminator
going to be
3.
pretty high. I'm going to go in at 73.
Whoa!
73 from Stuart Ashen,
58.
58, a little bit lower from Alec. Tim,
I'm gonna go somewhere in the middle and go for 63.
okay.
No, I'm going 40s. I'm going to say 45.
40s,
I've
well.
just remembered that Rotten Tomatoes is an aggregate of professional reviews. Isn't
It is, yes.
Oh. Continue.
You're also the closest, Stuart.
Oh,
It's 69, dudes.
Ha!
nice.
Yep, with an average score of 6.6 out of 10. And basically what that tells you, and as I found out in my research, it was quite favourably reviewed when it was released. People
yeah.
didn't think it was that bad. It's getting like 7s and 8s out of 10 and stuff. And then a few people were like, it's not as good as the first two though, is it? Like, Ebert wasn't particularly fond of it. Our old pal, Roger Ebert, come back again. He's actually on my side in that he wasn't too keen on it. I think he still gave it like 2 or 2.5 stars.
That's I would
Yeah,
use the same thing.
yeah.
It's not
Okay.
incompetent, but
Yeah.
you know.
And since we're on the topic of Rotten Tomatoes, can you guys, in the same vein as the Godfather trilogy, guess the ratings for T1 and T2 respectively?
Oh, fucking hell.
I'll give you a clue. They're both higher than T3.
I'm actually going to say it's going to be interesting because Terminator 1, I bet it's a bit low. People are still like, oh, it's bloody awful, too dark.
I do
I'd
not
say
understand
80s,
this.
like 85.
Yeah, I'd imagine it was probably one of those ones that was a bit underappreciated.
And then
at the
T2's
time.
going to be like 95 or something stupid.
I'm going 83 and 89.
Okay,
I'm going low 90s for both of them, 92 and 91%.
okay. Tim, any ideas?
I'm gonna say, I'm gonna say about 79 for T1 and then 92 for T2.
Interesting. So yeah, Terminator 1 is 83%, Terminator 2 is 93%.
that sounds about right. Sort of
It's
retrospective.
interesting.
I think is, yeah.
I'm guessing that's based on reviews contemporary to when the films came out.
Yes.
More than
Because
likely,
absolutely,
Terminator was a bit of a sleeper, wasn't it?
Exactly.
Yeah.
I don't imagine a lot of people now would say Terminator, piece of shit. Well, some people might because they're idiots.
So, why does Terminator 3 need sequelizing, gents? Should we get into it? I mean, yeah.
That was me in the cinema.
Astute. Before we get on to the negatives, I actually want to point out 2 or 3 little positives that I think redeem it personally. And then they are really small little
I
things.
know which two you're talking about, Matt, and they're on that billboard, am I right?
Tits.
Oh my god. No, the things that really I think stand out to me are little things. Like, for example, the idea that Brewster's father is in the military, and the idea that it was social media is sort of, not social media because it wasn't really a thing, but the idea of computers and blogging, that it was always with us, that kind of thing. And that when the TX reaches for John Connor's leg, something that robots never do in films, she grips his ankle and just shreds it. She immediately crushes it, because that's genius. I'm so sick of seeing people punching, kicking, and fighting away robots. And it's like, no, that is a vice. That is a mechanical vice. That is a piston grip. That will just maul your leg. Little things like that. I think this is a really good stuff. But the overall premise and everything else that goes into it is just unfortunately very weak. And the fact that I don't mind Nick Stahl, he's no goddamn John Connor at all.
I agree.
I think the issue with Terminator 3 is that it's a movie that was very much made in the shadow of its predecessor by the people that didn't make that second film rather. And I think the absence of James Cameron, I think you had people then scrambling and going, what do we do about this? It needs to be kind of the same as the second one. It needs to be different enough, but it needs to be similar enough that viewers are getting what they want. And you end up with a movie that's a retread a lot of the time, because narratively it really just follows more or less the same beats as the second one. Really, it's a fairly similar concept, and it's okay for that. That's the first problem with it, is that there's not really a lot of creative license there to do anything really interesting other than the ending, which we'll come on to at the minute, which actually works quite well. The trick ending is one of the few really great moments in that film. But I think the second problem is that when it comes out, the time it's made, it's a very self-aware movie at a time when movies were very self-aware. We were this sort of post-Tarantino era where postmodernism is a big thing. Mm-hmm. So it's this idea that it's a Terminator movie that knows it's a Terminator movie, so it has to kind of play with your expectations and be self-aware and have all of the talk to the hand and all of these kinds of jokes, and that stuff to me just takes me completely out of the moment of it as a movie. I stopped believing in that movie the instant Arnold Schwarzenegger puts on Elton John sunglasses.
Yeah, almost all of the jokes are like self-referential, weird callbacks that, if you haven't seen the other two, make no sense and have no context whatsoever.
And also that the characters shouldn't be aware of. It's the thing that, we as the audience are aware of, but that the characters aren't. So it doesn't make sense that they would find this funny, these observations. It's entirely done for the audience, which is
a huge problem in any script, pretty much, unless that's like Deadpool and you're breaking the fourth wall or something. Mm-hmm. Oh, having said that, Deadpool would make a pretty ridiculous entry into the Terminator universe.
Present Cable.
Exactly. He's kind of a cyborg.
He's a Terminatronic cyborg, yeah,
exactly.
Just to go back to the ending being very strong, when I was watching it in the cinema, and it is very much a retread of T2, and there's nothing particularly unpredictable happening, and it's, there's some nice action scenes with the lorry, but I'm kind of getting to the end of it. I nearly stood and cheered when it actually ended and gave me an ending I wasn't expecting. It's like, yes, something has happened.
The ending for me redeems a lot of the film. It sounds an unfair thing, but then I would say the same thing about La La Land, where the film is like, but the ending makes it like, actually, that elevates the whole thing. Just for that one moment, you go, that was a ballsy move. That's actually, and in the visual of it, especially at the time of the CGI of the nukes going off, it's quite impressive. And to see it in a cinema as well, it's like, you don't often see a film ending with the world getting
nuclear war. Yeah.
And it opens up to a really potential, genuinely interesting sequel of like, now we get to see the war. This is going to be cool, because that's kind of the thing. Terminator 1 and 2 don't really end on there'll be a sequel. They almost, both of them definitively end, and that's it. I mean, the first one ends on a really odd, the future isn't written kind of thing. Where's it going out on? It's a bit of a head fuck kind of thing. Second one's like, nope, into the metal, into the lava, done. That's him done. That's the story done.
Well, this is the weird thing, of course, with Terminator 2, is you really get the feeling that James Cameron was like, I'm drawing a line under this. Like, you really get the feeling he didn't want to make any more, and that they're then struggling to. He's written into a corner at that point, and it's like, what do we do? How do we make another one? And this is the result of that, and is therefore kind
it's
of
a reset. Hard white reset. Yeah.
I think it's interesting because when you go back to the first Terminator, it has these sci-fi trappings of time travel and killer robots from the future, but really it's a very pared down kind of thriller, almost like a horror film with this implacable foe chasing after people.
In a similar vein to Alien and Predator, both kind of, each franchise kind of starts off in a similar kind of vein.
And I think, one of the problems that we can, track across the entirety of it is that it's a franchise that doesn't really start off being about time travel or robots, but the longer it goes on, the more it has to be about time travel and robots, and that means it's pulling away from the things that originally made it great. And if you either have to kind of lean into that and accept, okay, well, it's going to be something different, or you have to kind of find a way around that. I think Terminator 3 is this point where it's kind of, like we say, you've got to the end of Terminator 2 and seemingly, James Cameron's reached this conclusion, and to then come back and go, well, actually, we want to tell more in this story. It puts it in a really awkward place just in terms of how it plays out.
We mentioned James Cameron not returning, and that is obviously a big part of this, the problem with this film. And he said it himself that T1 and T2, he's finished his story. He told the story he wanted to tell in that universe. There's no need for an extra one. And the studios were just like, well, we'll just get some other guy. We don't need James Cameron. You probably needed James Cameron. And there's a weird kind of there's a ridiculous deleted scene. Do you guys know about the delete? I assume you do, being Alec being a giant Terminator nerd.
It is a shitty scene.
I haven't seen it until researching for this for this episode.
Is this the one where they come up with the voice?
Oh yes. Yes. Basically trying to explain why Arnie keeps coming back and why that model is being reused, basically. And for the listeners who don't know, it's like a group of scientists are gathering around trying to make this like promotional video for the robots and the Terminators. And I've got the character name here of Chief Master Sergeant William Candy, which is Schwarzenegger with a deep Southern accent. And he explains he's been chosen as the model for the project. And then they're like, well, I don't know if your accent's necessarily appropriate for like a killer robot if we're going to be using this kind of thing. And another random scientist chirps in and goes, well, how about my voice? And it's Schwarzenegger overdubbing some other guy. It's like, what the... That doesn't explain anything.
But why does... It's also that thing of, and again, references for the audience that make no sense in the universe.
Yeah,
why does that need to
exactly.
be there? And there's a question that didn't need answering. Anyway.
Like, in the same way that, like, it could have looked like his creator or whatever, like the lead scientist could have just been Schwarzenegger. Why have this weird dubbing voice swap thing? That's so arbitrary. Because an Austrian accent is so much more believable than a Southern American accent. Like, what? It's arbitrary. It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, it's the idea that... the thing is, people watch, again, Terminator, the first film, there's almost no comedy in it. I mean, there's a few little bits like "You're dead, honey," that kind of
and
little
then
throw
there's
lines.
now iconic lines that have become...
They become very funny.
They're
Yeah.
funny through like The Simpsons referencing it and shit like that.
Exactly.
They go pop culture.
Yeah, the cultural footprint makes them more present, and they become funny because of it. The second one has quite a bit of levity to it, mostly because of young bratty John Connor talking and effectively programming this robot, and it becomes it's more endearing. And the problem was they've escalated that more than pushing visual effects and pushing practical effects and all those sorts of things. And rather than doing really interesting stuff, they've said, well, it was quite funny. It's like, where was it fucking funny?
I think part of the problem is we've got into the time when Arnie was, he was past his kindergarten cop thing, and a lot of the films he was trying to be more family friendly and, just...
He was gone being action hero. He was
he was about to make his pivot into politics. He doesn't want to be... telling people to fuck off in the film.
This is it's a weird thing as well, tonally, this movie, because it was an R in the States and it was a 12A over here.
Oh, interesting.
And it really pushes hard for a 12A because there's some stuff in there that you really don't expect to get. But it is certainly, it's soft enough that it would get a different rating categorization versus the first and the second one, which were hard R. Yeah, but there is one good joke, I think, in the movie, in the entire film, which
Please
is
don't say
where,
the boob thing.
No. It's the bit where they're in the back of the RV and Kate Brewster says to John Connor, well, maybe we can stop Judgment Day. Maybe we can fix it. And, look, you've done it before. And he's like, yeah, you're right. And Terminator turns around and goes, your levity is good. It helps relieve tension and fear of death.
Yeah.
And
And it cuts through.
and it's also amazing because it's foreshadowing. Because it's like, no, you can. And he knows you can.
Exactly.
And But that's the only joke in the entire film that I think lands. Everything else is just...
The other, 100 minutes and
Yeah.
odd change.
Oh, look, the psychiatrist from the second film has showed up inexplicably. Why?
Just as a very minor point, it is a film of terrible off-screen deaths. It kills off Sarah Connor, with leukemia or something. I can't remember.
Because Hamilton refused to come back.
Yes. And then we get the revelation that in the future, from the point where the Terminator has been sent back from, John Connor has been killed, and the Terminator was programmed by Kate Brewster in the future. But we don't see any of that. We got this great glimpse of the future war in T2, and this film you're just like, nah, we're not going to bother you showing you, this
RV.
this supposed great general being taken down at the final moments of the war. Like, why would you want to see that?
You see Nick Starr with a scar on his face going, "Rah! Rah!" with a flag? What do you need?
Why'd you want to see that when you could see Arnie in a pair of Elton John sunglasses? That's what the people want.
Don't forget that Macho Man is playing in the background for extra hilarity.
Yes. Oh, God.
I lolled and lolled and lolled.
So last 2 points before we get to some pitches. Do you guys roughly know the budget and box office at all? Any guesses? How much money did it make?
Fucking loads. Bet it cost loads, but it made fucking loads of
You're
money.
correct.
Yeah.
In terms of
Could you be
human
any
money,
more vague?
it's a lot of money.
I'm going to say it's going from 2003, so I'm going to say it's 110 million,
Interesting.
and it will have made, I'd say it made 300 or 400 million
Okay.
dollars,
Tim, any ideas?
pesos.
I'd say a little bit more than that. I'd say a budget of about 200 million, and I reckon it brought in 400 million.
Okay, Stuart.
I'm going to say 90 million budget, and it brought in £3.72 and some buttons. No, it brought
Cadbury's
in
buttons.
200 million. I don't know.
I'm going to say 150 million, and I'm going to say it brought in 400 million, and I'd like to say that I'm in part responsible for that, because even though I didn't like this movie, I sure as shit bought the toys.
And we'll get onto the toys in a second as well, because I know Alec will love to talk about toys. The budget was in fact 187 million.
Whoa,
And
that's
it-
incredible
And
for
it
the time.
made 433 million.
Yeah.
But most of that was Alec on toys. So
Yeah.
And 30 million of the budget was just Schwarzenegger's purse. He was paid.
I think they literally like a massive gilded purse.
It was a bum bag.
I need 4 elephants to carry this to my dressing room.
I need an expensive action figure for my son.
Breed them.
He was paid upwards of between 29 and 30 million dollars for his appearance in this movie. On top of that, he also received 20% of all the gross receipts of ticket sales, DVDs, TV rights, game licensing, and in-flight movie licensing for this film worldwide.
shit.
Were there any video games of Terminator?
There were a
There
couple.
There's two of them. Yeah.
I can't place it. What system were they for?
One for PS2.
One of them was PS2. The one called Terminator 3 Rise of the Machines is for PS2. Yeah.
I had an actual official. I did not know that.
Yep. It's not good. Surprise, surprise.
I probably could have guessed that bit.
And the weird thing is that scene where they smash through the building, they couldn't afford to do it, so Arnie paid for it himself.
Whoa.
That's how much of a baller. Even 2003 Schwarzenegger was just like, oh, I'll just pay for the building. It's fine. Like, we want to smash through this
did it
building.
himself for a minute.
I will do it.
Stand back.
Runs into the wall, falls unconscious.
The goggles, they do nothing.
I bought the airline. It seemed cleaner.
I was again another random point. I might keep doing this throughout the episode, and I apologize. But again, it's just every now and again they crop in my head, like, oh yeah, that's a really smart thing to do. When they're trying to pick up the Arnie body, the paramedics or whoever the hell they are, there's like, come on, guy, come on. Oh, he weighs a ton. It's like, yes, of course he'd be heavy. He's made of metal. little things like that, little things, and then you obviously ruin it with
So
a mediocre film.
you like this movie because it understands that robots are heavy and dangerous.
Yeah, okay. Those are two of our central themes.
Yeah, you have to remember, I'm the kind of person who refuses to give teddy bears to children because bears will fucking kill you. Don't give children bears like, oh, he's cuddly. No, he's gonna fucking kill you.
What?
They're not actual bears, Matthew.
But they are. A bear is a bear.
To explain the concept of plush toys. So let's go on to you guys fixing it, shall we? Gentlemen?
Yeah.
And I'm going to start off with Matthew and Timothy.
Hi.
Hello.
You don't have to do it again. You did it at the start of the episode. We know who you are.
Right, would you want our team name first?
I would like a team name, please, sir. Yes.
Tim, would you like to debut our team name?
I will do. Our team name for this
We don't even have to
episode.
explain what it is, arguably, because it's been covered.
It has been covered. We are the life and times of Chief Master Sergeant William Candy.
Yeah, the title of this film is Terminator 3 Rise of the Machine.
What?
Oh,
Oh my god.
That's right.
Just one 800 feet tall Arnie. No, it's the Bender statue from that episode.
Yes.
Remember me.
But with a, Schwarzenegger voice.
Yeah.
No, it's not. It's Sergeant Candy's voice. Remember me!
Elevator pitch, please, sir. Yes.
I'll defer to Tim for our elevator pitch.
Okay. Despite the events of the first two Terminator films, Judgment Day still happens. In the past, a damaged Terminator seeks out John and Sarah Connor, while the future John Connor completes a potentially war-ending mission.
Time hopping potential there. Interesting. Over to Stuart and Alec. Team name, film name, and elevator pitch, please, sirs.
Our team name is The Sequel Is Not Set. There is no pitch but what we make for ourselves.
Do I have to say that whole
The
sentence?
sequel is not set. We'll be fine.
I want the whole
That
fucking
will
thing.
do.
Tim. These are two long-ass team names.
Thanks, guys.
The little Twitter poll allows for maybe a couple of characters, and it's like, oh no.
And our title is Terminator Future Proof.
Oh.
Made in the year 2003.
So, elevator pitch. Now an adult, John Connor must once again face off against a Terminator threat and prevent Judgment Day. But as history begins to repeat itself, Connor questions whether there really is no fate but what we make for ourselves.
Interesting. Okay.
It's very similar to our Matrix pitches.
You had time hopping adventures in your Matrix as well. So, yeah. So back to Bill Candy.
Bill Candy!
That's what we're exclusively calling you both from now on.
You can. It's not our full
The
title.
two Bills,
Disgraceful and disrespectful, but sure,
or
we'll
the
take
two
it.
candies. if you
Billy
will.
C, as some of us called him. Nobody calls him. or Willy Candy. With,
William Candy.
Bilbo the Sweet.
William Candy, of course, will be a character on a split role played by John Candy's ghost and Billy Idol.
oh my God! Why isn't Billy Idol the Terminator? Was he in the running for this? Like, I'm sure
hope
I
so.
heard somewhere he was in the running for some ridiculous movie role that might have been the
A support as
Terminator.
himself in The Wedding Singer.
Like before that, like he was Billy. I think Billy Idol was in the running for the fucking Terminator or for the T-1000. I think Billy Idol was the first choice for
Wow.
the T-1000. I'm looking this shit up.
I mean,
because-
I'd rather see Billy Idol as the T-1000 than hear Robert
think it's
Patrick's cover of White Wedding.
I think Idol would be amazing.
Till you've heard it.
I was convinced you were going to say, I'd rather see Billy Idol's penis than Robert Patrick's penis.
I mean, yeah.
Billy Idol was almost the T-1000 in Terminator 2. I
Fuck
did
me.
not
Jesus.
make that up.
Holy crap.
But unfortunately, he was busy, so they had to go with an actor instead.
Yes.
Oh, what a shame. That's where they always go wrong. In
Have
Hollywood.
you seen this
hiring
little boy?
actors instead of random musicians?
May I direct the audience back to our Pirates of the Caribbean pitch?
Why the fuck Billy
Why
Idol
wasn't-
isn't in our...
Oh no! You've migrated.
Can we
from
make
Frampton.
John Connor Billy Idol? Can we go back and do this again?
You've migrated from Frampton to Idle now.
Oh, wow.
I don't think it is.
Do you want some full details of what we've got planned and in store for you, Jack?
Cast,
and the
cast
listeners?
crew, director, all that kind of good stuff.
What's
Please, William Candy.
Billy Candy!
Set yourself down for
Our
a
main
right
character.
fine tale.
I
Our
might
main
actually,
character, Bill Candy.
I'm not gonna lie, I might actually use that fucking voice in Taiwan.
Played by Foghorn Leghorn.
Here we go. Release year, the year 2000, 9 years after Terminator 2. I'm not even kidding. I'm gonna do this whole time.
You sound like fucking Bill Paxton. Why are you there?
It's funny you should say that. Or not.
Oh,
Tim, do you want to bounce back and forth? Yeah.
Our director will be the esteemed James Cameron.
Hey.
We're getting him back. We've convinced him.
He's a
We've
hack.
Found a story good enough to tell.
He heard that. And he's crying.
I'm sorry.
So in our returning cast, we have Linda Hamilton as Sarah Connor, Edward Furlong as John Connor, Arnold Schwarzenegger as the T-800, and previously playing an unnamed character, or I think perhaps Punk Number 1, but we have named him Bullfrog Sinkowitz. What? Bill Paxton.
Oh, dear God. Off to a strong start there, gentlemen.
Okay, our new cast. The role of Commander John Connor, being played by the gentleman who's been in Air Force One, Lost in Space, goes on to be in Hannibal and Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban, Gary motherfucking Oldman.
Oh.
In the role of a young Kyle Reese, or a regular age Kyle Reese, I guess. From Disturbing Behavior Gossip goes on to be an X-Men, James Marsden.
James Marsden.
We had another
Interesting.
picture I did for-
Westworld's James Marsden.
Indeed. Oh yeah, I didn't even twig that link. Yeah, nice. We had another person in mind, and then Tim hung out with Marsden, and I said, "Oh, nice, a bit of a pretty boy." And then he said, "Yeah, Bean's a pretty boy." And looked back at pictures of him in Terminator 1 and go, "Oh yeah, pillowy lips." Michael Pillowy Lips Bean.
That's what it says on his business card.
Okay, we also have in the role of Lena Stamp, Angela Bassett. From Stella Got Groove back in the score and various other bits and pieces. The role of the T730, the T730, because we've also got numbers and all kinds of letters and bullshit because it's robots.
I hope you're ready for numbers, folks.
Yeah, brace yourselves. Yeah, the T730, played by Ron Perlman.
Whoa. Okay. Hellboy himself.
Yep, he'd been in Alien Resurrection, Happy Text at this point, goes on to be an Enemy at the Gates, Blade 2, lots of other things. We have a role of Dr. Chen Na, being played by Ming-Na Wen. Who
You love a bit of Ming-Na Wen, don't you?
Well,
second,
yeah.
Second time casting it.
Well, to be fair, the one was Mulan. She's the lead character. So, but I do like Ming-Na Wen. I think she's good. Yeah, who she's been on since Mulan. She was in the TV series of Spawn, Final Fantasy: The Spirits Within, etc., etc., etc. Wade Gannon is played by Paul Gannon. Yeah, Wade Gannon is played by Gary Sinise,
Oh.
who've been in Ransom and Snake Eyes. And in the role of Michael Turk, a very charming PA guy, Dwayne The Rock Johnson, who had been at this
The
point
year
most-
2000s.
the year
Dwayne The Rock.
2000, yeah.
Wow.
So he'd been in wrestling at this point. He goes on to do The Mummy Returns and Scorpion King, but he's not really in establishing much acting roles other than
This is his-
the wrestlings.
Is this his feature film debut
This is-
then,
this
I
is
guess?
kind of is,
We
yeah.
believe his
Yeah.
feature film
Yeah.
debut.
Because, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, and we have one last thing to comment on.
Yes, our composer is David Arnold, who at this point has done Independence Day, Godzilla, goes on to do Changing Lanes, Shaft, and he's also done several Bond film themes. So
right.
he's done The World Is Not Enough. He'll go on to do Casino Royale. And
I do love David Arnold, mostly just, I mean,
You're a bit of a composer nerd, Matt. I appreciate that about you.
oh, thank you.
Yeah.
I am.
I don't. I hate it.
What? Who invited Alec? I mean, when I was a kid, I watched Stargate and thought, this music is one of the best bits of music I've ever heard. David Arnold, you say? And he just, as I say, he sort of drifts in and out of certain things, but he really should be in a lot more stuff, I think.
Yeah.
We think he'd be appropriate with his deep tones for this film.
Over to Ashen and Plowman, a.k.a. the sequel is not set. I'm not saying the rest of your title.
Well, that was longer than the title.
Cast, crew, directors, please, sirs.
Certainly. The director, it must be Jimmy Boy Cameron coming back.
Jimmy's back.
Because he is our own last
Double
best
dipping
hope
Jimmy
for the Terminator. Our cast, appearing again as a T-800. There's a lot of them, you know. It's Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Yay.
He's not coming to your birthday party, Jesus Christ.
I fucking wish he was.
Present day John Connor will unfortunately, well, not that unfortunately, but slightly unfortunately, be played by Nick Stahl.
We're giving him a second chance.
Again, I don't. Ours being 2000, yours 2003. That's that's
You're American History X time, aren't you?
Yeah, correct. Yeah.
Right.
Edward Furlong would not be in a state to unfortunately be making a feature film for us
yes,
at
yeah,
this
of course.
time. Future John Connor, Brolin.
Oh.
Josh Brolin,
Interesting.
Cable himself.
Yeah.
The TX, which in our version does not stand for Terminatrix, is Michelle Yeoh.
Ah, fuck
Oh,
yeah.
nice.
Yeah.
And General Brewster appears, but as a different actor. It is the mighty J.K. Simmons.
Oh wow. Yeah.
Who also appeared in Terminator Genisys. So he's getting his Terminator do-over.
Fair play.
Yeah. So, practical visual effects for our movie will be done by Stan Winston Studios, obviously. Digital visual effects, though, Weta.
Oh,
Lord
okay.
of the Rings time. Yeah, that
Yeah,
makes sense.
you're in the era of Weta.
Yeah.
Yep.
And music by the returning Brad Fiddell, who retired in 2003, so this will be his last ever movie. And what a movie to go out on.
Whatever will the theme be, Brad? I was thinking just dun 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 dun, but maybe not the right
Sequelisers thing.
Dun, 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 dun.
dun 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 dun.
Basically-
Hey,
I've dropped this rubber ball in a metal bin. Just listen. Do, 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 do. Hey, hey.
the secret
But
history of
behind
cinema.
the scenes knowledge. So you can join us next week where we'll get into both teams' pitches. And we will properly fix Terminator 3, Rise of the Machines. See you then, folks.
I got no
You
idea
won't see
jokes.
us. It's a podcast. It's fine. Listen to it then, folks.
Thanks for listening.
See you next week.
Next time on Sequelisers.
Use your own fucking imaginations. We're tired.
The movie was in your head all along. Goodbye.